At 18, I had a badge. There's often a threshold that if your loss is even under $1 million, you may not even get a call back. The scammer is a slave in many cases, and the victim just lost everything. Who do you root for? The world, the banks, the fintechs, your listeners need to understand they ain't seen nothing yet.
Okay, Michael, nice to meet you. Lovely to have you here. And great conversation I'm sure we're going to have. Maybe just to kick off, you could just say a little bit about what you do in your organization.
Sure. My name's Michael Roberts, and I'm a private investigator specializing in cybercrime and transnational organized crime. I started my company Rexfield with 2 X's in 2008. So for the last 16 or 17 years, we have been providing first response or rapid response to crimes in process, mainly financial crimes. And I'm now co-founder of a company called Sting Base, and we have a unit called Sting Force, and we're collecting crime fighters from all over the world, from law enforcement, from banking, finance, anti-trafficking, anybody who disrupts or solves crime, to come together. And it is our goal, an ambitious goal, to bring justice at scale to the world and break down the barriers that come with borders, diplomacy, and things like that.
So when you say first responder, it's a bit like first aid almost, right? It's trying to get in quickly.
Getting in front of it rather than always chasing.
So I have to ask, how did you get into this in the first place? What first drew you to this line of work?
When I was a long time ago, in my late teens, I was working as a clerk for the Australian Telecommunications Commission. And just in my clerical duties, I noticed some strange behavior with a business client. And I reported that to the investigations division. And the next day, in an open plan office, in the days when everybody was smoking, maybe 100 people, open plan, 2 big men, short haircuts, ties, scary looking fellows, came and stood beside my desk. And this 18-year-old kid is like, hello? I said, don't be worried, you're not in trouble. They took me away to ask me some questions, but they liked my work. And then they recruited me for the investigations division. So at 18, I had a badge, leather. So that's where I learned I had a nose for it. And I'm also a serial entrepreneur. So I've done lots of things, but joining the dots has always been in my blood.
I guess it's not the obvious thing people would connect, sort of crime investigation, that type of work with the entrepreneurial side. But I guess in your case, obviously it's worked.
Anything needs the efficiency of private enterprise to make it really work. So what, for example, SpaceX is to NASA, what we're doing with Sting Force, we want to be to global law enforcement. So we want to combine the power, the reach, the authority of government, sovereign law enforcement agencies with the efficacy and the agility of private crime fighters.
Do you see much differences in different jurisdictions globally? Because obviously you travel the world, right? You've been in a lot of countries.
Yes.
Have you seen many differences?
Definitely. And even within each jurisdiction, within the different agencies, some agencies are full of dinosaurs. They don't want to work with PIs. I'm a PI. I'm a private investigator. There's a lot of pushback from traditional law enforcement. So we're trying to break down that glass wall.
So you have a team basically, or run a team, or there are these people that are on call, ready to come to the assistance of somebody. When do you first get questioned? When do you first get called in any particular case?
It comes in so many shapes and sizes. Sometimes it's too late because they went to law enforcement first. And I work with many mission-driven, justice-focused law enforcement agents and officers, but their often hands are tied because they might be ready to run the full case, but the prosecutor isn't guaranteed a conviction because the perpetrator is offshore somewhere. And so there's no justice and there's no relief for the victim. And then other times they just call, we don't know what to do, but we know there's a window of opportunity. Can you help? And so I've done pro bono help for law enforcement for the last 16 years. And it's very rewarding. And other times you get the victims directly. If it's sextortion or they're just embarrassed that they got scammed, they sometimes come to us directly. And if they can afford it, they engage us. We get on board. We usually, if it's a Western victim in the States, Australia, my homeland, or Canada, for example, we try to bypass local law enforcement because generally it can slow things down. And we use social engineering to find where the perpetrator is located. And we try to go directly to law enforcement in that jurisdiction. And we negotiate with the the law enforcement or judiciary there to allow the victim to be admitted as a criminal complainant in that jurisdiction without even going to the country. And that way we don't need the law enforcement in the home jurisdiction, which speeds the whole process up.
And so how do they find out about you? I mean, personally, I don't think if I was scammed or I became a victim of some crime, I wouldn't know where to go. Obviously, you've got the regulatory reporting channels, but I guess that's not going to find its way very easy to you, certainly not in the timescales that you need.
It actually does. We do get a lot of unofficial referrals from special agents in the US, the different agencies from regular law enforcement around the world who understand their limitations, what they can do, or what they're allowed to do, or what's going to happen when it gets to the prosecutor. And they sort of just let the victims know you might want to call these guys. So that happens regularly. And as I mentioned, insurance companies sometimes mandate that if they're going to pay out on a claim for a bank fraud, for example, if it's a business email compromise or something like that, they dictate to the victim that they have to get a forensic investigation at least. But we try not just to do forensic, we actually try to catch the bad guys. Insurance just wants answers. What happened? We try to actually find out who did it and where they are.
So the scenario is, say tomorrow, hopefully doesn't, but I fall victim to a scam. I report it. I might get an indication maybe to get in touch with yourselves, contact your organization. Is there sort of a set sort of checklist of questions or qualifiers you have to go through to establish whether there's even something you can do to help, or how does that initial engagement work?
Sure, and it doesn't have to be our organization. There are others, not many, but there are others. Sure. So if the case is fresh, if it's happened in the last few days, if there's a lot of money involved, they're the two big ones that make the case very viable. So what a lot of people won't realize that in Canada, UK, Australia, America, the US, there's often a threshold that if your loss is even under $1 million, you may not even get a call back. So it needs to be at least $500,000 in bigger cities, over $1 million before there's any chance of the case being taken, unless it's very, very fresh, hours, 1 or 2 days maximum. So the laundering process may not have been completed because they will launder it through money mule bank accounts, convert to crypto, back to fiat, and so forth. And that can take a few days. But once it gets beyond about 3 or 4 days, there's very little, in my experience, there's very little law enforcement can or will do. You have to get really into the weeds to solve those cases. And that takes time and resources and connections.
So there's a value consideration. There's a time, obviously, as you say, the sooner you can intervene, the better
Yes.
chances. What about things like crypto? If somebody says, oh, they like the pig butchering scam, say, that recently happened in Dubai, if somebody says, I transfer my money via crypto, is that also then going to be a problem? I guess that's really impacted the effectiveness you can have.
Every scam is a problem, but not insurmountable. Crypto is an indelible ledger. We can trace it. We can defeat mixers and the obfuscation attempts. We can take it as far as an exchange, for example. We can't see what happens after the exchange. Some exchanges will cooperate with us and give us hints as to where it might have gone, which exchange next. Other times they say only if law enforcement contact us. When that happens, it's the victim's probably the chances of recovery are much lower. But that's one of the things, the glass walls we're trying to break down. We're building a platform, we're building a network of people who, based on public interest, justification, mitigating or ending a criminal sort of laundering process, might share limited information with us or people like us, so we can keep the investigation going, waiting for law enforcement to catch up with the formal request or subpoena for the full information. But we have some really good exchanges that we've worked with who will at least tell us what jurisdiction the KYC is for. So when they do that, we can then contact law enforcement or the contacts we have nurtured in those jurisdictions. So I've been to Nigeria, I've embedded in the EFCC headquarters, for example. And then we can start things in the jurisdiction. We don't have to wait for the US or the Western law enforcement to get all the information. And we won't know who it is, but we know where they are. And then we can use other avenues to identify them. We will engage the scammer, pretend we're a potential victim. We'll have our victim introduce me as a wealthy retiree who wants in on this. So the victim should never say that they know it's a scam. That we need to reverse social engineer the scammers. So they'll introduce me. I then engage, or one of my team members will engage the scammer as a prospective victim, and we just trick them into doing things they wouldn't do if they knew who we are. We can then isolate their location, and then we can have them arrested. And sometimes we can get them arrested before the crypto's even arrived in there, been converted back to cash to their local bank accounts.
It's interesting you say that the victim shouldn't reveal they know that it's a scam, because that's often how these things, actually end up, right? After a while, somebody suddenly it twigs with somebody, say, oh my God, maybe I've done something, or they speak to a relative or a friend and they find out it's been a scam. But you're saying that actually for your work, that makes things potentially a little bit trickier.
Yeah, because you've telegraphed your punches. So that's an emotional outburst. You're a scammer. I know what you're doing. Their guard's up. They're just going to ghost you.
So, Michael, you mentioned about how some of the existing sort of typical channels exist for reporting crimes where a victim can go to. Maybe you've got some experiences about how that's working today and some of the challenges that presents.
Sure. Bureaucracy is the main challenge. As an example, we have a client in Dubai who's a UK citizen, was scammed by a Ukrainian. So we were able to trace the crypto scam to Ukraine. We have contacts with Ukrainian cybercrime. I wrote up the case for them. I handed on a silver platter. They said, yep, we'll take this case, but our law doesn't allow us to initiate it because the crime didn't happen. The complainant is not here. So they instructed me to contact British law enforcement. British law enforcement would only allow me to do it through Action Fraud portal. So I wrote up the full crime, the identity, who's responsible, and even gave them in the report the name of the captain in Ukraine who's waiting for them to request the evidence that they've already preserved. A month later, I got an email from Action Fraud saying we've assessed the case and we cannot find anything that we can do, so we're closing.
Do you think that was some sort of standard response, or do you think that anybody had looked at it? What's your feeling there?
I really don't know, but it perfectly illustrates the crisis that we're in. So in 2023, the Secretary General of Interpol at the centennial for Interpol said transnational organized crime is broken. Something's got to change. We need to change it. And so if anybody wants to look up what's called the Interpol Vienna Declaration, it lays out the problem.
Do you ever come across situations where businesses are scammed? Does that work in any different way? Are there different rules?
Sure. That's one of the ones that I mentioned where the insurance made the victim come to us. So there's a case we have at the moment where there is a U.S. military contractor, was a customer of another U.S. military contractor as the vendor, and it was a business email compromise. So there was a almost $1.5 million invoice that had to be paid, and the insurance company made them contact us to do the forensic assessment of what happened. But we're doing more than that. We're actually trying to chase it. But in this case, it's a law enforcement agency that's not working with us. Things would work much better if we could have two-way flow of information.
And how do you follow the money? Because obviously maybe the law enforcements are cooperative and helping you, giving you some signals, but I guess the money is still going through the banking system. So do you get much help with that, tracking the flow of funds?
Only if, so yes, it goes through banking system, but usually only the first or second hop. So in this case, they sent out an invoice. The scammer set the filters for the accounts receivable. So she didn't see the emails coming from the person trying to pay the money. And then they registered a lookalike domain, a phishing domain, to take over the email communications, gave them an invoice with a new bank account. And then the accounts payable changed the bank account. It went to a money mule. So it was like probably an 80-year-old man or woman in, upstate New York or something, doesn't even know the accounts in their name, operated by the scammer. And from there, they sent it to a crypto exchange or to another bank, and then to crypto, and then it's in the blockchain. And so we chase it in the blockchain as well.
So to me, that's quite interesting, the sort of influence you have. You mentioned earlier about, the domain hosters, you mentioned about the crypto exchanges, and they are almost sort of assisting the victim but with sort of just some notification from yourselves, right? There's something suspicious going on here. Can you assist? Can you do this? Can you do that? How do they know that you are credible? I mean, how, like, playing devil's advocate, how do they know that you are not maybe operating on behalf of other, criminals?
The ones who do cooperate, sometimes they already know us, and it's immediate if we lay out the crime well enough. Others will do a little bit of due diligence. Others ask for references. But they can check my LinkedIn history. They can see that I've been to the Balkans with DHS and FBI supervisory special agents teaching prosecutors and detectives in that region, for example. And they can see that I have some bona fide, experience. Others are just, no, thank you. We only deal with the police.
So you do quite a bit of teaching, which is great. Do you also train up private investigators on how to follow the practices?
Yeah, our plan is to sacrifice our old brand, Rexfield, which is, we're not closing it down. We're going to move Rexfield from a B2V, that is business to victim, provider of services, to B2B. And we want to train, at the moment, there's in the US, for example, there's hundreds of special agents that are 50 or over and 20 years of service. That means full retirement. And they're lining up to join us, what we're doing. So we're going to create kind of a business in a box for a lot of these retiring agents and sheriff's deputies and things like that who have experience in cyber. And we will fill the gap. Whatever they can't do, we will do for them as a B2B type service, and while we train them up. So we're more interested in justice at scale than we are in dominating the marketplace. So we're doing it kind of as a public benefit corporate enterprise as opposed to for profit. Yeah, profit's nice, but you can do good as you go.
And you mentioned private investigators. I think the impression I have, maybe someone doesn't know the field too well, is that they are very different things that a private investigator can do in one country compared with another.
Yes.
I guess the US, stands out for me as probably being where they can probably do the most things, but maybe that's a misconception. I don't know, but there's certainly differences between different countries. Is that correct?
Sure. Some countries it's illegal. You can't be a private investigator in some countries.
So how many of your investigations would you say stay within one national border, or do they always nearly seem to go overseas? Is that
very rarely do they? Like we had one yesterday with the Queen's DA office. It's an amazing case where everything was within the actual borough, or within that city. But usually, particularly with scams and financial scams, it's almost always cross-border, and multiple jurisdictions.
And quite near, like near the beginning, they soon quickly hop overseas, go across that country boundary. Is that fair?
From the outset, it's usually the nexus is normally offshore. Even a romance scam, do you have WhatsApp? Do you ever get a WhatsApp number? Say, hi, it's Julie. How are you? So it's very likely Julie is a slave in Cambodia, forced to scam people, and there's hundreds of thousands of them.
So not to be forgotten, there's victims both sides. Yeah.
Well, who do you root for?
Yeah.
The scammer is a slave in many cases,
mm-hmm.
and the victim just lost everything. Who do you root for? So we need to take out the principles, and we need to get the ISPs, the platforms, the telcos, the banks, the crypto exchanges. We need to get them on board because they're literally saving lives by reducing the demand for kidnapping. If they dry up the money supply, they can't buy new slaves. So we can literally disrupt the slave trade by acting on our intel in a timely manner without saying only if the police call us.
So we were talking earlier about, I think Jim Browning just posted on LinkedIn recently about
my hero,
how they'd intercepted and closed down a massive operation in Dubai.
Yes.
Do you have any more details about that?
I do. Yeah, I was actually in Dubai when he posted the first video. I was at the World Police Summit, which is the biggest police summit in the world, in Dubai every May. I'm doing keynote speech there this May. Yeah, Jim's amazing. Yeah, what a heart for justice.
Yeah,
and so humble.
Yes,
so humble.
I know. Yeah, I've spoken to Jim before. Yeah, great guy.
I watched your interview with him.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. It was really revealing for me, I think, and very eye-opening, as you say, and just amazing what lengths and what facilities are set up in some of these scam centers.
Yeah,
incredible hospitals, clinics, everything set up. What's there now afterwards? So they've taken these people, they've deported a lot, I believe, back to their home countries. What's left in these buildings? Because it basically was like a small city, wasn't it?
Lots of mattresses. That's one thing we noticed. There was mattresses everywhere when we drove around it. But I don't know. Real estate is cheap in that part of Dubai at the moment. I'm sure they'll be repurposed.
So when you were there, it was just basically an empty city almost, ghost city.
No, there were many people there.
Still.
But there's nothing around it. As Jim said in his video, you drive up to it, You can see it from miles. There's just nothing, just desert before you get there. It looks purpose-built to me.
So they built a whole city almost around this. I mean, I know Jim's quite technical and he has some great capabilities. And I think you mentioned earlier that when you're talking about how you can train some investigators, from private investigators, the ones that are retired maybe, but you also put in the words they've got cyber background. So how much technical knowledge do people need to have to get into this?
They don't. They actually don't. They just need to be mission-driven. It's about justice, and justice has two sides to it. Okay, so if justice is just punishment for the bad guy, that's actually just revenge. It's good for the prosecutors that they're worried about their career. They get 98% conviction rate, but if there's no recovery, relief, restitution, clawback for the victim, then there's no mercy. So justice has to be balanced by mercy, and mercy can look like, as I said, relief, recovery, just answers. So there's a lot of victims who just lie awake at night. What if? And sometimes they hire us, they just want answers. So I say, okay, answers I can guarantee. Anything beyond that, a recovery in part or in whole is a bonus. And recoveries are rare, but they're possible, and they're getting better as we develop more relationships. So last year, a man bought $320,000 or $360,000 worth of. He bought exactly 10 Bitcoin, and he lost it all. And we were able to freeze 9.15 Bitcoin. And we worked with the Utah Department of Public Safety, the criminal investigators there, the state police. Amazing hero. His name's Jeff. And we ghostwrote the subpoenas and so forth and the freeze requests at the exchanges, and they did do a permanent freeze. And then in May last year, we got the 9.15 BTC back, and it doubled in value. So he actually doubled his money in a scam. It was an exceptional case, but
yeah,
it was a happy ending.
Yeah, it was a very volatile market, I guess. So yeah, so that was interesting. So you actually got the assistance from the authorities in that case, from law enforcement. And does law enforcement need to speak directly with the victims when you point law enforcement in that way, or are they okay to work with just the information that you provide?
They do need to hear from them, and in most jurisdictions now we have a kind of a process where from the very beginning I will draft an affidavit of beneficial ownership. Okay, this is the asset that I lost control of, but I am the beneficial owner, and we lay out the details. They sign it digitally, and then we provide that to the judiciary or the law enforcement in the jurisdiction where the scammers are located. And that's usually sufficient. So we have another interesting case in Ghana. It was a sextortion case. So a woman called me. Her sister was going to kill herself, and she explained what happened. I said, okay, get your sister on the phone. She's going to be okay. So she dialed her in, and I just said, look, things might get worse before they get better, but you're the one that's in control now. Okay, so it's going to be okay. She thought he was in the UK. I ghostwrote a message for her to send to him for a copy of a bank transfer, but I caused that image to go through our servers so I could see where he was, and he was in a little village in Ghana. And so I then contacted the CSA, actually the Interpol liaison for the top Interpol guy in Ghana, who I know. And the next morning, he and his prosecutor, Victoria, we had a call, a Zoom call, and we laid out the plan of attack. And then what we did is we had the victim arrange for a wire transfer. So it was always crypto. And I told her to tell the scammer, the sextortionist, my bank won't let me buy more crypto. They said I can only use cash or wire transfers. He'll probably tell you, no, you need crypto. So I told her to tell him, is there any other victim in the world who can buy crypto? I can wire the money to that victim and they can buy crypto for you. That's a good idea. And then he gave her a bank account for a little village in Ghana, which happened to be the same little village where his IP address is located. So the CSA guy drove 9 hours to the other side of the country to go, because there's sometimes corruption problems with police and banks. He went to see the bank manager, explained the op. The bank manager, sure, you can pretend to be an employee. I'll call him, tell him the money's arrived, and you can arrest him. And that's how it went down. So he was arrested Christmas Eve, 2023. He's been in custody ever since. And the Ghanaian legislature is changing the law now to allow the victim to do Zoom testimony so she doesn't have to go to Ghana. And the prosecutor's going for at least 15 years without parole. but with aggravated circumstances, because he sent videos to her of him uploading her videos to pornography sites. So that's aggravated circumstances. They're actually going for 25 years without parole for sextortion. And then if that makes the news there, he's Nigerian. A lot of Nigerians go to Ghana and South Africa because the infrastructure is better. The electricity stays up longer. The internet stays up longer. So again, this will be a disruption, PR opportunity. Don't do this in Ghana. It won't end well for you.
Wow, there's a lot of moving parts in that.
Yes.
In that story, the fact that you had to go via another victim. So that was probably, as they say, there's no perfect crime. That was almost like a situation where the scammer made a mistake in some ways, right?
Or greed. It all comes down to greed and pride. So the biggest problem with law enforcement that don't play nicely with private crime fighters is pride. And the biggest, and that's the downfall of their career, their statistics, and their mission. And the biggest motivator for failure by the scammers, of course, is greed. And so a classic pretext is, introduce me, I'll pretend I'm a wealthy, retired doctor or something, and I take over the pretext communications and manipulate them.
And you also mentioned about, in the sextortion case, you also mentioned that, I think you said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So again, you must have some skills and some experience in having to navigate that conversation as well. That because, as I guess, what you mean by that is that there could be more publicity and more.
He might release the
exposure.
videos.
Yeah.
But it's not the end of the world. So I've had a lot of these cases, and I've lost 2 victims to suicide, and have probably talked 30 out of suicide in my career. Whether they followed through with it or not, I don't know, but they're in a pretty bad way.
Brings it home as well. So it goes beyond just the scams. But again, you needed the cooperation of quite a number of different organizations just to close that and make it a success. You needed the bank as well, even at
Yes.
the receiving end.
Yeah, and I should add, both FBI and her local sheriff both told her there's nothing they could do, and that's why she was going to end it. And so after we actually got the arrested, and we still needed U.S. law enforcement to subpoena a couple of records. So after he was in custody, then they helped a little bit with the case. Yeah.
I see, through the law enforcement channels. And it was her sister that found your organization.
Yes.
So she herself probably wasn't proactively looking for, so how could I get out of this, and looking for somebody like yourselves, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say are some of, think, like the biggest, so obviously your approach and your methods have improved, and you said you're always adapting and finding new ways to do a better job. Equally, I guess the criminals are doing something similar. What are some of maybe the 2 biggest changes you've seen in their activities?
AI. So the world, the banks, the fintechs, your listeners need to understand they ain't seen nothing yet.
So I'm sure we've got a lot of people listening to this podcast today who maybe have been in situations where you could have potentially helped. How should they get in contact with yourself or your organizations that can assist them?
Sure. So for now, it's Rexfield with 2 X's, REXXFIELD.com. But in the future, as we develop the community of people who will effectively be competing with Rexfield, and that's what we're encouraging, it'll be through stingforce.com. And we're available to help or point them in the right direction.
And that's pure in confidence. It's anonymous. Yep.
Yeah, it's implied by our profession. But professional regulations for private investigations is similar, and we will often be under the umbrella of their lawyers if they want lawyers, but they usually don't need lawyers at this point.
Michael, it's been great talking to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
I've learned a lot. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Thank you.